What if I told you that stupidity is not merely the absence of knowledge or the failure to grasp facts, but something far more corrosive? A current that can seize even the brightest minds and turn them into willing instruments of harm. The most dangerous threat to a society may not be the malicious few who knowingly commit evil, but the countless well-intentioned individuals who have simply ceased to think for themselves. Imagine a celebrated engineer, armed with degrees and accolades, suddenly lending his reputation to falsehoods that endanger lives. Picture a respected physician endorsing policies that undermine the very principles she once swore to uphold. Envision a devoted parent making choices that harm their own children while believing they are acting in love. These are not villains. They are competent, even compassionate. People ensnared by what Dietrich Bonhoeffer called the power of stupidity. And the unsettling truth is that this is not confined to strangers in distant places. It unfolds among people we know, and perhaps within ourselves. This is no idle speculation. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram orchestrated his now infamous experiment at Yale University. Ordinary men and women were instructed by an authoritative voice to administer increasingly painful electric shocks to another person. They heard screams, cries for mercy, pleas to stop, and yet 65% continued until they believed they had delivered a fatal jolt. They were not sadists. They were ordinary citizens who had relinquished their own moral compass under the weight of perceived authority. Bonhoeffer saw the same abdication of judgment in Nazi Germany, a surrender of intellectual independence by those who, on paper, should have been its guardians. In a letter from prison, awaiting execution for resisting Hitler, he wrote with chilling clarity, "Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasoning falls on deaf ears." What made this insight so devastating was its precision. Bonhoeffer distinguished between evil and stupidity in a way few have dared. Evil carries the seeds of its own undoing. It generates opposition, breeds resistance, invites confrontation. Stupidity, in contrast, wears the mask of virtue. It acts in the name of good, and in doing so, becomes almost impervious to correction. It does not flinch when confronted with evidence, for it does not believe it is wrong. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. Stephen Hawking would say decades later, echoing Bonhoeffer's warning. Perhaps most alarming was Bonhoeffer's realization that stupidity is not merely an individual weakness, but a product of certain social conditions. Those who wield power need not silence dissent directly. They need only create an environment in which critical thought becomes difficult, costly, or dangerous. In such a climate, surrendering one's independent judgment begins to feel not like cowardice, but like prudence. The Roman historian Tacitus once observed that under tyranny, the desire for safety stands against every great and noble enterprise. Bonhoeffer understood that the will to think can be broken not only by violence, but by fatigue, isolation, and the subtle erosion of personal responsibility. This was the soil in which functional stupidity took root, what we might now call willful ignorance. It is not a lack of capacity, but the refusal to use it. In conversation, you do not meet the person before you. You meet the slogans and sound bites that have colonized their mind. And here is where Bonhoeffer's theory grows darker. The more educated the person, the more elaborate the justifications they can weave for the beliefs they have uncritically adopted. He was describing a form of intellectual captivity, one that thrives not in illiteracy, but in the echoing chambers of consensus. But if this is how it operated in the Germany of the 1930s and 40s, what happens when the very mechanisms that produce this captivity are amplified 1,000-fold by our own age? That is the question Bonhoeffer could never have foreseen, and the one that shapes the peril we now face. The surrender of independent thought does not happen in a vacuum. It is cultivated, sometimes deliberately, often unconsciously, by systems that reward compliance and punish dissent. Bonhoeffer's observation that stupidity is more a sociological phenomenon than a psychological defect was prophetic. The environment shapes the mind, and the mind, under certain pressures, learns to bend until it forgets. It can stand, Modern psychology has mapped the mechanics of this surrender in unsettling detail. Milgram's obedience experiments showed how easily ordinary people defer to authority. Solomon Ash's conformity studies revealed that 3 out of 4 individuals will go along with an obviously wrong answer if the group insists on it. Leon Festinger's research into cognitive dissonance demonstrated that when we are confronted with evidence that challenges our beliefs, we instinctively reject the evidence to preserve our identity. When you add economic stress, social isolation, and information overload to this mix, the result is not just ignorance. It is what economists call rational ignorance, the choice to remain uninformed because the cost of understanding feels too high. History offers chilling precedents. The Salem witch trials of 1692 were not orchestrated by villains, but by pious townspeople who believed they were defending their community. During the Red Scare of the 1950s, patriotic Americans, many of them educated and principled, supported blacklists and persecutions that destroyed innocent lives. In Mao's Cultural Revolution, students denounced their own teachers, believing they were purifying the nation. In each case, it was not malice alone that drove the tragedy, but the collective abandonment of skepticism in favor of group consensus. Today, the machinery is more efficient and less visible. Social media platforms profit when we react quickly and emotionally, not when we deliberate carefully. Algorithms learn what confirms our biases and serve it to us in a steady drip, constructing echo chambers so comfortable that leaving them feels like exile. News outlets, fighting for clicks, frame complexity as conflict, nuance as weakness. Politicians craft slogans that are short enough to fit on a placard, but too thin to carry the weight of reality. These are not flaws in the system. They are the system. Functional stupidity becomes adaptive in such conditions. When every hour is consumed by work, bills, and the ceaseless churn of notifications, the mind conserves energy by outsourcing judgment to the crowd. It is easier to absorb a headline than to read the study it cites. Easier to repost a sentiment than to verify its truth. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman once wrote, "In a liquid modern life, there are no permanent bonds, and any that we take up must be tied loosely so they can be untied again as quickly, easily, and painlessly as possible." Our relationship with truth has become just as fluid, just as disposable. The danger, as Bonhoeffer saw, is that this adaptation feels like normal life. People stop noticing the slow drift away from independent thought because it is masked by the rhythms of work, entertainment, and routine. Stupidity, in this sense, is not the storm, it is the climate. And in a climate where questioning is costly, conformity becomes the currency of survival. But what Bonhoeffer could not have imagined is how these forces would evolve when the levers of manipulation passed from human hands into the circuitry of machines. The propaganda of his day was blunt, broad, and slow compared to the surgical precision of what we now face. And here is where the past meets the future in a convergence he would have found both inevitable and terrifying. Human beings did not evolve for the world we inhabit now. Our minds were forged in an environment where speed often meant survival, where trusting the familiar and avoiding the unfamiliar could mean the difference between life and death. These instincts, once essential, now make us vulnerable. Bonhoeffer witnessed how Nazi propaganda could colonize the minds of a nation using newspapers, rallies, and radio. But those tools, crude by today's standards, were limited by time and geography. Our era has removed those limits. From the broadside posters of the First World War to the radio speeches of the Third Reich, the path has led to a place where persuasion is automated. Social media platforms track every click, every pause, every moment of outrage. Artificial intelligence refines this data, not to serve truth, but to keep our attention captive. The result is a weaponized intimacy, an ability to tailor falsehoods so precisely to our fears and desires that they feel indistinguishable from our own thoughts. A 2018 MIT study showed that false information online spreads 6 times faster than truth. Not because people are malicious, but because falsehood often feels simpler, more emotionally satisfying, and less demanding to believe. The consequences are not abstract. In the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, Surgeons, engineers, and scholars, people whose professional lives depend on evidence, were swept into sharing debunked cures and unfounded conspiracies. These were not failures of intellect. They were failures of independence under immense pressure. The 30 Years' War in the 17th century offers a grim historical echo. Entire regions were devastated, not only by military conflict, but by a population locked into ideological entrenchment, unable to imagine the other side as anything but the enemy. The war ended not because truth prevailed, but because exhaustion overcame conviction. We are now entering a phase even more perilous than Bonhoeffer's world. Deepfakes can fabricate speeches, events, even the appearance of guilt or innocence. Information no longer has to be discovered. It can be manufactured from nothing and made to look indistinguishably real. Where Bonhoeffer feared the passive surrender of thought, we now face active, engineered assaults on the very processes by which thought occurs. It is not simply that we are being lied to, it is that the machinery of deception is adapting faster than the human brain can adjust. The question Bonhoeffer asked in his letters, "Who stands fast?" has lost none of its urgency. In fact, it has gained a sharper edge. Who holds their ground when the cost of truth is not just social isolation, but the suspicion that your very perception of reality can no longer be trusted? Who keeps thinking when certainty has become the cheapest and most addictive drug of our time? This is the line that now runs between the human being and the human instrument. On one side stands the person willing to wrestle with complexity, even at a personal cost. On the other stands the person who has surrendered to the ease of pre-packaged certainty. And the machinery of our age is designed to tip as many of us as possible toward the latter. If functional stupidity can be cultivated, it can also be resisted. But resistance does not begin with grand gestures. It begins with small, disciplined acts of mental independence. Bonhoeffer called this costly grace the willingness to think when thinking is uncomfortable, to question when questioning is dangerous, and to remain curious when certainty would be easier. Modern psychology gives us language for this practice: intellectual humility. It is the recognition that our knowledge is incomplete, our perspectives are partial, and our beliefs must be tested if they are to be trusted. This humility is not passive. It requires deliberate friction. Set aside time each week to read or listen to the most thoughtful voices who disagree with you. Not to abandon your convictions, but to see if they can survive scrutiny. When you feel absolutely certain, ask yourself what evidence would make you reconsider. If no such evidence comes to mind, that certainty has already begun to harden into dogma. Before sharing a claim online, pause for 1 minute to verify it from a source that gains nothing from your agreement. And when you do not know, have the discipline to say, "I don't know." In an age that rewards confident ignorance, admitting uncertainty becomes a radical act. Yet individual action alone will not suffice. The conditions that breed intellectual surrender are structural. We need transparency in the algorithms that filter our reality. We need public investment in media literacy so that citizens can tell the difference between evidence and propaganda. We need policies that reduce the chronic stress of economic insecurity, because a mind consumed with survival has little capacity left for careful thought. The philosopher Hannah Arendt, reflecting on the collapse of democratic norms in the 20th century, warned that the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction no longer exists. Without structural safeguards, even the strongest minds can be worn down. The tragedy is that surrender often feels like liberation. It is tiring to hold competing ideas in tension, painful to admit we may have been wrong. The comfort of certainty is seductive, especially when the crowd offers applause in exchange for compliance. But the cost of that comfort is the quiet erosion of our humanity. Bonhoeffer understood this when he faced the gallows in 1945. Executed for refusing to bend to a murderous regime, his stand was not only political, it was an act of defiance against the idea that human beings should live as puppets pulled by the strongest hand. The danger today is not that we will fail to see stupidity in others, but that we will fail to recognize it in ourselves. The moment we assume we are immune, we have already begun to fall. The price of intellectual freedom is constant vigilance, directed not only outward but inward. This vigilance is not paranoia. It is the discipline of asking, am I thinking because it is easier or because it is true? So here is your challenge. Choose one belief you hold with conviction and spend 30 minutes this week seeking the best arguments against it. If it survives, it will stand stronger. If it does not, you will have gained something far more valuable than the comfort of being right. You will have moved closer to what is real. In a world that profits from our intellectual surrender, each choice to think carefully is a form of resistance, and every act of resistance, however small, defends not only your own mind, but the fragile possibility of human wisdom in an age increasingly designed to erase it.